Gaming isn't dead, but creativity is. You've probably noticed that the modern AAA gaming space is filled with the rehashing of old material, from remasters to remakes to reboots, and constantly getting sequels. And even with those sequels, they just keep on re-releasing old content from their previous games. Originality, talent, and genuine care are all extinct in the AAA space right now. But a lot of individuals love to spout off the rose-tinted glasses or it's just nostalgia arguments whenever you bring up the decline of AAA video games over the last 10 years. But you'll often notice that those arguments are usually made by the same people that love to fawn over the new shiny thing. You know who I'm talking about. The consumers, who have to have the latest thing, play the latest game, and ingest whatever garbage these corporations put out. They love to say things like,
"That game is so old, bro. Oh my god, the graphics are so dated. What? No battle pass or drip feed content? I'll get bored with that in a month."
And you'd think that people don't say that last comment, but when Elden Ring and Hogwarts Legacy started losing its player count on Steam, these dorks were treating it as if the game was dead, saying things like,
"See, if it isn't a live service game, it dies."
As if it's a bad thing that some games can eventually come to an end. And I know a lot of you know exactly the type of people I'm describing here. You've probably met a few of them, unfortunately. And again, also, unfortunately, they are the target audience at large. The current generation of gamers that are hype beasts, blinded by the next honeymoon phase, constantly defending the corporations who, at the end of the day, only sees them as a titty to milk. But let's get into the meat and potatoes of the video. Creativity is dead. Now, you don't have to take my word for it. According to researchers at the University of William and Mary, creative scores, measured by what's called the Torrance test, have been steadily declining since the late 90s. And we're now in the middle of what these researchers are calling a creativity crisis, due to overstimulation and the lack of boredom. Because yes, boredom has long been recognized as the key ingredient for imagination. Boredom leads to daydreaming, which leads to creating a simulation in our mind, then figuring out a way to execute that vision. And this line of thinking has led to some of the most influential video games of all time. For example, the idea for Pokemon came about when Satoshi Tajiri revisited his childhood hometown as an adult. As a child in the 1970s, Satoshi spent hours exploring the rivers and forests and catching bugs, but 20 years later those same rivers and forests had been replaced with numerous homes and both commercial and office buildings. Satoshi thought about all the kids who were unable to explore that same nature and collect its mysterious creatures like he had. And he paired these thoughts with his own love of arcade games, and this led to the initial idea and concept for creating Pokemon. Or I think about the storytelling of the Souls series, inspired by Miyazaki's childhood, where he used to read books beyond his own comprehension, where he only understood maybe half of the words, and he had to fill in the gaps with his imagination. Miyazaki wants the player to use their imagination to fill in the gaps and piece together the puzzle pieces that he intentionally left behind. Hell, even the Souls game's multiplayer mechanics were inspired by Miyazaki's own personal experience. He notes several instances of driving up a snowy road as cars ahead began slipping back and were then pushed uphill by other people in the area. And as Miyazaki was unable to give his thanks before they left the area, he wondered whether the last person in line at the bottom of the hill made it to their destination, as he was unlikely to ever meet them again. And this gave birth to the very impactful silent cooperation of the Souls games. These two creators, inspired by real-life experiences, took the time to ruminate about how to replicate those experiences inside of video games, and changed gaming forever. Of course, these aren't the only two examples of creativity in gaming. There are in fact many examples of genius in the industry that has given us unforgettable experiences throughout the years, through either the gameplay or the narrative, or hopefully both. But you don't need some researcher at a college to tell you that creativity is dead. All you need to do is take a step back and really take a look at the entertainment industry today. The best games of this year, for example, so far are remakes. Dead Space, Resident Evil 4, System Shock, all good games, but they're not original. And in fact, aside from graphics, are in some ways even downgrades. Not always, but definitely some. But most AAA games completely lack any creative touch, and it leaves the games to feel a bit soulless, very corporate. And I'm not going to pretend that video games haven't always been about making money, the same as any other entertainment industry, but there has been a fundamental lack of creativity in every single category of the AAA industry today. And outside of that, smaller studios like AA's and indies are still producing solid products, somewhat, keeping creativity alive with games like Shadows of Doubt or BattleBit or Hades or Tunic. There are good games being developed by creative individuals. But AAA, man, whew, man is it bad. So what's the cause for this lack of creativity? Corporate interference in the creative process? Trend chasing? Obsessing over realism? Or focusing on all the wrong things? I would say all of these are the culprit. But one thing that I often never see being brought up is the genuine lack of talent at these studios. I know, armchair game dev here, hello, nice to meet you, but I think it's important to realize that most of the studios we grew up respecting and loving aren't the same studios at all. It's like the ship of Theseus. If you replace every part of a ship one by one until none of the original parts remain, is it still the same ship? And if not, at what point does it become another ship? Arcane of 2012 is not Arcane of 2023. Bungie, Blizzard, BioWare, Obsidian, Konami, these studios have largely had most of their parts replaced one by one and are not the same studios we once knew, which is to be expected. People move on, retire, or even move up the corporate positions rather than stay in the trenches engrossed in the actual development process. And the results speak for themselves. Somehow the animations and lip syncing of Assassin's Creed was better in 2010 than it is in 2020. The quest design and writing of New Vegas, a game made in 18 months with 70 devs, outclasses Fallout 4's writing and quest design at every single turn. And Bethesda claims that Fallout 4 took 7 years to develop, with over 100 developers. Or we take a look at examples like Gotham Knights, which is not developed by Rocksteady, but obviously was trying to repeat the success of Rocksteady's Arkham series. And despite being 7 years apart, Batman Arkham Knight outclasses Gotham Knights in every single category, from the writing to the gameplay to the world and art design to the sound design, all of it. And then you take a look at what Rocksteady is making now and holy shit, how is this the same people behind this? Well, Ship of Theseus. It's not the same people behind this. Now, even if the corporate overlords pushed Rocksteady to create this game, I think that the 2015 studio would have probably delivered something better than whatever the hell this is. A similar thing happened with Arcane and Redfall, where 70% of the development studio that were there for Prey 2017 were no longer at the studio for Redfall. So Redfall feels like baby's first video game project for a reason. The examples could go on and on. However, one of the largest examples of incompetence on both the part of Activision and the developers is at the Call of Duty studios. 13 years ago, Treyarch, the creators of the Black Ops games, had roughly 200 developers in 2010, and they delivered back-to-back the greatest COD games of all time, filled to the brim with content between multiplayer and zombies, and masterfully told campaign narratives, all developed in under 2 years each. But in 2023, the latest Modern Warfare 2 was worked on for 3 years by 11 different studios, totaling to 3,000 developers, and has delivered on a fraction of the content as these older Call of Duty titles. And most of the content that they put out is reskins of that content developed by the old development teams. The campaign narrative chops are nowhere near as good as the 2009 Modern Warfare 2, and there are more bugs and glitches than can even be quantified at this point. Is it too many cooks in the kitchen? Genuine incompetence? Lack of direction and too much interference from corporate? Again, all of the above. But 3,000 devs with 3 years versus 200 devs with 2 years. If that doesn't show you incompetence at every level, including the ground level devs in those studios today, I don't know what will. And while we're talking about quality in Call of Duty, I just want to highlight zombies. When we take a look at Black Ops Cold War zombies compared to Black Ops 2 zombies, it's a joke. Not that Cold War zombies can't be fun, but think of the maps in Cold War and their Easter eggs versus the likes of Mob of the Dead, Buried, Origins, maps with Easter eggs that are light years ahead of Cold War in terms of creativity, immersion, level design, and an art and graphical style so much more impressive than Cold War zombies. How the fuck have zombies regressed so far to this generic mobile game feeling horde mode? It's so frustrating. But probably the saddest area to see lose creativity is in the writing and storytelling of video game narratives and dialogue.
Bow to your queen!
Yeah, okay, that is something I do now. I do magic, talk to sentient cuffs, kill jacked up beasts. You know what?
I don't have to love it. I have to pay my student loans.
I'm in.
What the fuck is this piece of shit?
Now I know this isn't just a gaming problem, all media's writing has tanked off a cliff so hard, but video games are a unique storytelling medium. There are certain stories that can only be experienced inside of a video game, and I think the best example of that is BioShock. There is no way to deliver that narrative in a movie or TV show. Not that you couldn't make a movie or TV show with Rapture as the setting, but that specific story could not be translated to TV, because one of the biggest parts about the twist in the story highlights that gamers mindlessly follow objectives and obey whatever an NPC asks of them, tying in with the "a man chooses, a slave obeys" idea. The player realizes that they've been a slave both narratively in-game and almost in a fourth wall breaking kind of way. Narratives like that, again, can only exist in video games. These thought-provoking pieces of art that dig deep because they require a player to be in control. But with the obsession of realism, games have essentially become movies. If you remove the player, the stories would still be able to be told in any other media. And their narratives don't go much deeper than "violence breeds more violence" or "face our fears." Not inherently bad concepts, but so many times it's extremely surface level, and again can be experienced in any medium. Give me more games like BioShock, Dark Souls, Firewatch, Portal 2, Undertale, The Masquerade Bloodlines, New Vegas, Disco Elysium. Games that take advantage of the fact that they're video games and tell their narratives in a way that capitalizes on the strengths that gives them. And what makes this creativity drought even worse is the gamers who have no standards. Gamers that are so easily entertained. You could make a game about two dudes playing hopscotch, make it look ultra realistic, throw in some Marvel dialogue about the struggles of hopscotching as a man, and boom, masterpiece for normies. These same gamers would then go on to defend the publishers and developers as if they work at the studios, saying that game development is so hard and gamers are so unaware of the challenges. And while that can definitely be true, you don't have to be a game developer to see situations like 3,000 devs with 3 years versus 200 devs with 2 years and say, yeah, something is definitely fucked up here. But again, gamers have no standards. Or should I say, they have the wrong standards. They want large empty open worlds, ultra realistic graphics, and facial animations, and will fawn over some of the most generic Marvel tier storytelling in existence. They will hype up gameplay that was surpassed by studios over 10 years ago, bend over when a company demands money for their progression systems, cheerlead for them when they ship a broken game and say,
"It just launched, they're working on it,"
and willfully spend hundreds on cash op items because
"I just like to look cool."
This is modern gaming, the death of creativity. Talent is extinct. Genuine care belongs to bygone days. And gamers have zero standards.